Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial's set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're here. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. If you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933. We'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933 during the hours of 9 through 11 a.m. Central Time. That's when we're live. If you'd like to listen, take us with you. Listen while you work. 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Rich Sheben's with us. Offgridmontana.com. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vince. Always a pleasure.
Hey, have a good weekend?
I did. Yeah, had some people over, did a little fishing, cut some firewood, all the typical stuff that we do for off-grid during the summer months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about, I was having a sip of coffee this morning before the broadcast, and I was thinking about electricity. I was in the kitchen, and I was looking at the dishwasher, the coffee maker, the electronic ignition on the gas propane stove, the overhead lighting, the toaster, the griddle, the machines that we have, and there's more. Then look across the kitchen, and there's the stereo system and the screen if we want to watch some videos, DVDs and so forth. Then there's the computer. And then you turn to the right, and there's the washing machine and the dryer and some more electric lights and so forth. And my question for you is, I was wondering, did you have a realization that there were far more electric devices that you had been accustomed to when you lived on the East Coast than when you moved off the grid and had to watch every watt?
Well, the realization that I came to, Vince, was, when I lived in the East Coast back in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, technology wasn't what it is today. For example, even though I live off-grid, I have fiber optics and internet DSL coming into my home, my cabin. But what I did come to the realization was all the manipulation and corruption about the economy and the central banks and the powers that be with the Keynesian economic model and group identity politics, and how this was going to be a ball and chain around the average Joe or bottom 93% of Americans. So I realized, thinking with some foresight, that we were going to have to cut back and basically make a distinction between needs and wants. And that's what a lot of people are having problems doing. And because we're teaching our children how to push buttons, manage paper, be politically correct, they are not learning skill sets in an economy that's not just a deflationary spiral, but with stagflationary consequences to the middle class, which is the worst of both worlds. So the majority of people, basically, again, the bottom 93%, because the poor and the middle class is almost melded together, they're losing control of their own destiny. So living with alternative energy, having solar, having a generator, making your own power, growing your own produce, hunting your own meat, raising your own animals, all the things that we do is, in a sense, relearning those old 19th century skills, but dovetailing them with 21st century technology. Now, if the power went out I could live in this cabin very easily with the way I've set it up, where I would never need power, ever. And most households would be totally inept, would be basically just a roof over their heads. It'd be almost worthless in a sense if the grid went out, whether it be solar, man-made EMP, or anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was just wondering what the experience was like looking at, do I want to actually when you generate your own electricity from solar, it's you're limited by the number of panels, you're limited by the number of the amount of the sun, the solar rays generating that electricity with your panels, and it's not infinite. So you have to be mindful of your consumption, and you can use it faster and run out and be in the dark, or you can be judicious and have it serve your needs. And I was just wondering how that felt when you came to the full realization by experience that it is not infinite. You have a finite amount of electricity. Did you run out at some points? Say, wow, I need to make some changes.
First of all, I felt empowered. I felt in control of my own destiny. Secondly, 8.5 months out of the year, your question is irrelevant, because here in Montana we get so much sun during those summer months that I have an infinite amount of power, but our lifestyle doesn't use it. But during the winter months, when I have to supplement with a generator, it's maybe twice a week. If I use 5 gallons of gas per week, that's a lot, which is nothing. I mean, I can get in my pickup truck, go to town, and round trip use that much. So it's a very small system, 675 amp hour system. And my analogy would be, if you have a coffee cup versus a 5-gallon barrel, it's a lot easier to fill a coffee cup up and get your batteries to full, because when you use deep cycle lead acid batteries, you need to fill up those batteries approximately once per week or every 8 days in order to keep the capacity and battery life strong. And I very rarely go below 80% of power. So in other words, I don't reduce my batteries more than 20%. If I do, it's rare. So I keep my battery life strong. And I'm always checking the electrolytes and doing what needs to be done for maintenance, which is very simple, very easy. And there's new batteries out there now, like the silicon salts or the nickel iron, that bypasses a lot of the maintenance, gives you much more shelf life, and some batteries out there even give you a forever guarantee. So it's up to each individual, depending on their lifestyle, their preparation, their capital resources, on how they want to proceed for off-grid living.
Yeah, I was just wondering, as I walked through the kitchen this morning, what your reaction was when you first experienced going off-grid, when you were in total control of your own destiny. Meaning, if you do it right, you're in charge. If you do it wrong, you're in charge, and you've got to remedy that, and it's up to you. There's probably not many people to call if you make a mistake, and you're out there.
Oh, again,
and I love it. I love it.
It's empowering. It teaches you skill sets. I mean, how are we going to continue with civilization if all our youth knows how to do is press buttons, manage paper, and be politically correct? We are not teaching them anything. In fact, we're putting them more into debt, where 90% of the college degrees are totally worthless. So if we can do things that gives us a penny saved, penny earned reciprocation, why not do that, especially if it gives you skill set, right?
When I graduated from the university, my dad put his arm over my shoulder and said, I'm paraphrasing, said, son, so what'd you learn? And I said, well, Dad, and my dad was a principal and educator and acting superintendent of schools. And he had spent his entire professional life in education. And I said, well, Dad, I learned a few facts, and I learned how to think. And I don't think that was the right answer. I don't think that was the answer he was expecting. He was shocked. But that really is the truth. I learned how to think. And an example of that is I went to the internet, and I looked at different designs for solar racks, for mounting these solar panels. I looked at all of them that I could find. And I wasn't happy with a single one. either from the cost standpoint or how I would maintain it, or how I'd get the snow off it if it snowed. All of the aspects that I could think of, I looked at, and I decided that I would make my own. But I decided I wasn't going to spend a lot of money on it either. So I did a little bit of engineering, did a lot of drawing on paper and pencil. I decided I needed some tools in order to do it. I needed a chop saw, a 12-inch chop saw. Then I had to figure out which was the best chop saw. I ended up with a DeWalt 12-inch chop saw because I didn't like any of the other ones. I thought they were too flimsy. Then I wanted to get a welder, a MIG welder, and I looked at those, and I figured the one I wanted was a Lincoln, but I didn't want to buy a new one, so I found a used one. And then I wanted to get the steel for the solar rack array, and I didn't want to buy new steel, so I found some used shelving that came from Lowe's and Home Depot and Walmart, and I fabricated it, and we welded it together, cut it and welded it, and it's now all I have to do is finish the hay, so I can drill some holes into the ground and pour some concrete piers and mount the shelving that's all welded and put the panels on it. That's all I have to do. And so those are some of the skills and things that I learned and how to think in school. But it was not one thing. It wasn't a class. I didn't go to a class on how to learn how to do this. It's the culmination of a bunch of experiences and the desire to do it and the ability to start doing it. And a word that was used when I was in elementary school, which I haven't heard since, is stick-to-itiveness. I don't know if that was a word when you went to school, but it was back in the 1950s and 60s. And it meant staying with the task until it's completed, stick-to-itiveness. Mm-hmm. And and I think that's something that's lost.
Yeah.
Right?
It's synonymous
stick-to-itiveness. Fred Sheaben's with us, Off-Grid Montana. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about cryptocurrencies. We're going to talk about gold. We're going to talk about silver, the uses, what you need to know about it, and why. OffGridMontana.com with Rich Scheben. I'm Vin Finelli. Rich Sheben's with us. Rich, before we get into gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies, you'd mentioned the bottom 93%, which I am part of. Joe, let's talk about the top 3% for just a second. Joe Biden's niece, and this is the New York Post. Joe Biden's niece dodges jail after a $100,000 credit card scam. Goes on to say the wild child niece of former Vice President Joe Biden stole more than $100,000 in a credit card scam and quietly cut a plea deal in a Manhattan court that spares her any jail time, the Post has learned. Using a borrowed credit card, the blonde Carolyn Biden set up an unauthorized customer account at Bigelow Pharmacy on 6th Avenue in Greenwich Village and racked up a six-figure bill over the course of a year, according to a criminal complaint that does not name the victim card owner. As part of a plea deal before Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Kevin McGrath, Biden, 29 years old, pleaded guilty to one charge of grand larceny and another of petite larceny and agreed to make restitution of $110,810. If she pays everything back and keeps her nose clean, this is what it says in the article, she can return to court and enter a substitute plea to a lower misdemeanor charge of petite larceny and be sentenced to 2 years probation. But she'll stay out of jail even if she fails to live up to the plea deal instead of getting sentenced to the felony larceny of to 5 years probation. So the whole point is, Rich Scheben, do you think you could pull off doing something like that? Do you think I could and have it work out so well for us?
Well, see, Vince, this is one of the
bottom 93.
Yeah, and this ticks me off because this is why I say we have to have the same rules, laws, and accountability for everyone on American soil. In other words, we have to. That's the first part of standing for principle. The second part is telling the truth. In other words, you have to be willing to be hated for telling the truth versus wanting to be loved for blowing smoke up someone's keister and telling certain people or certain groups what they want to hear. And the third thing about standing for principle is if someone else does it, you should be able to do it too. And this is one of the reasons why we have to wake up the American people. We live in a fascist system. And only 4 to 6% of people make their primary income from being self-employed. It's the corporate, big oligarchies, corporate America, creating alliance with the government, protected by the state and the court system. They're all bought and paid for. That's what status quo means. Status quo, and more people should be using this term because I've used it on hundreds of radio shows. What it is, it's an incognito caste system. It's not as deliberate and open and obvious as it is in India, but that's what the powers that be are doing. It's the rise of political correctness and the fall of the middle class. And this is why equality between the super wealthy and everybody else is widening more and more on a daily basis. Vince?
Mm-hmm. Well, so Carol, it says, goes on to say that Carolyn's father, James Biden Sr., is the financier brother of the vice president. So you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. There are different rules for different people, and I can't understand how come there's not more outrage over this. Absolute outrageous. Over $100,000 scam, and it's just probation. If a person were to steal, $1,000 from a bank around here, that person would be in jail, probably beat up, and do prison time for $1,000. But this is okay. It's okay because it's part of the upper 3%. I just want to share that with you and the class, and share our outrage. But so what we're learning, Rich Scheben, is that the media has been awful. They've been vile. They have been on the side of the dark administration. That would be Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, those guys. They are on the side of them, and they're against us. They're against us, truth and justice and fairness and equality and work for a living. However, I would like to share this. I was outside over the weekend baling hay. Baled 122,000 pounds of hay over the weekend. And I believe it was a record yield for us. But that's because the sun came out. Since Donald Trump has been in office, we have had less spraying of chemicals over our skies. The grass is growing. The trees look better. Everything looks better. Even the outlook is better. That's why I call it the dark days. Rich Scheben, so where would you like to start? Gold, silver, cryptocurrencies?
Well, I'll start with cryptocurrencies, but what I want to do is put what I'm going to talk about regarding precious metals and cryptocurrencies in context, if I may, Vince. Basically showing when you were talking about the word stick-to-itiveness, why the bottom 93% needs to have tenacity, foresight, and the plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, because things are so corrupt and manipulated. For example, the central banks, just so far this year in 2017, the 5 big central banks have printed $1.5 trillion out of thin air money, and they've bought a lot of the most popular stocks and bonds. Banks have been caught rigging all the markets, Libor, Forex, silver, treasuries, the VIX, which is the volatility index. No one goes to jail. There's no consequences. It's really, truly the aristocracy versus the serfs. And this is why I always say that there is not a left-right paradigm. That is the bottom-level deceit to low-information voters. There's maybe a 5% difference between left and right. It is the aristocracy versus the serfs. All the books are cooked. And with the way they're printing money, there's always been a big debate between increase in money supply or CPI measuring inflation. And what's the answer? And it's very obvious now, if you do a little reading, that increase in money supply is the absolute worst thing for the bottom 93%. I'll just give you one example. When Hank Paulson from the U.S. Treasury in 2007 asked the powers that be to print $4 trillion money out of thin air to bail out Wall Street, the big banks, the auto manufacturers, insurance companies, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, the too big to fail, too big to jail. We had a situation that 95% of that money, depending on what you read, went to either the top 1% or 7%. Okay? But that's where the variation was. It didn't go to the bottom 93%. It did not trickle down. So this is the reason why the people are looking for plan A, B, C, or D. And I'll talk about cryptocurrencies. I'm going to start with cons. So for those of you listening, I want to put a little disclaimer out there. It's not cryptocurrencies or precious metals. The powers that be are purposely creating a narrative, a theme, a meme, a talking point in order to divide us more, because that's their MO, is to distract, dumb down, and divide us by groups. So basically, everybody's on the same team because they're trying to have a plan B, C, D, or E. It's not going to be cryptocurrency or precious metals. So I want to mention some of the cons about cryptocurrencies. First of all, right now, this industry is in its infancy. There are over 800 cryptocurrencies on the market. So that could be an inflationary or devaluation situation regarding cryptocurrencies in general. Now, Bitcoin, I've read this many times, is used to track criminals on the internet. And a lot of people might say that's neither here or there. However, there are some red flags. I also read articles that the UN is pro-Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, that some big banks are pro-cryptocurrency. Now, to me, those are major red flags, because that tells me that they have back doors or possibly already bought and paid some of the people with back doors to manipulate or confiscate. That's always something to consider. And if there are back doors, that means there's no anonymity like people think, which is one of the biggest reasons why the public is looking towards cryptocurrencies. Now, the banks they've done this for decades, for generations. They've spent billions of dollars on propaganda by the banks and elites to make people believe a certain narrative. Now, this is something that you have to all to consider, because the big banks absolutely want a digital currency, because they want the corruption, the manipulation to continue. They do not want accountability. So this is something you have to think about. And I know people who have done cryptocurrencies, and there is a bit of a process to convert it back to cash or to buy certain tangible hard assets. That's something to consider as well, which, if there is a process, that really doesn't defend anonymity again. Now, yes, there is a finite amount of cryptocurrencies, but let's say you don't get in early. It's kind of almost a pyramid analogy for the pyramid business model, where what if it went to $10,000 per coin? How many people are going to be able to afford it when 69% of the American public don't even have $1,000 in their savings account? Now, there's been so much hacking. There's been ransomware that's created from our own intelligence agencies. With everything that's going on with our intelligence agencies, and the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, all 17 agencies, you have to ask the question now, who are they working for? Are they working for the American people or the highest bidder? Now, one good thing about Bitcoin, from what I've read, is that it is decentralized. It does not have a CEO and a business model that can manipulate the amount of coins. But again, when you get to a certain amount, and there's 800 out there, it's going to be a devaluation scenario or an inflationary scenario or a lack of confidence scenario. And this war on cash needs to be repeated. Digital currency is what the powers that be wants, okay? They don't even care about the world reserve currency status, the petrodollar, which is our dollar, and Russia and China certainly doesn't either. They would want the IMF to create SDRs. They want to eliminate accountability. So here's another thing. What if the Fed or the powers that be or the George Soroses of the world buys billions of dollars of cryptocurrencies, whether it be Bitcoin or whatever, and then they sell it a week later? What's going to happen to the confidence from the people who have lost all that money? It's going to create doubt. So again, I'm not trying to put down cryptocurrencies. I think there will always be some, but then you got to ask yourself, what about the internet? What if there's an EMP? What if we have World War III? Now, I've read that if you have a smartphone, a cell phone smartphone, you can have cryptocurrencies working for a while. However, remember the word smart, whether it be smart meter, smartphone, smart refrigerator, smart home. Inject the word spy in that. In fact, I got that, Vince, from John Regan when he was a host for your show, and he was a host for me a few times when you were out, and I use John's line all the time about that. And another thing is, how do you know cryptocurrencies wasn't created to draw investment from precious metals? These are all concerns we have to have. And I can't tell you how many articles I've read regarding cryptocurrencies, and I'll say this: beware of the tulip bulbs, because everything that goes crazy is a bubble. Now, you remember back in the 1600s in Europe when people were buying tulip bulbs and they were going up in value so much, and it got to the point where it just crashed overnight because people were saying this is ridiculous. And you got to decide, where is that ridiculous line going to be crossed? Now, there's some pros. What if gold gets back to Bitcoin? Okay, now that could be very interesting, but are you going to be satisfied with just pictures of gold that could be gold plated or colored tungsten in a vault, and you say, "Oh, look, it's backed by gold"? I mean, unless there's accounting and the people actually have the ability to have confidence in the system, I think it's all going to create doubt. Now, another good pro about cryptocurrencies is that there's no futures markets, there's no options, you can't sell short, and people are looking for a hedge, because everything in life right now regarding finance and economy, for the bottom 93%, is the word hedge or speculation. It's so corrupt, it's so manipulated, and people are desperate to just survive. And I know there's some people who are buying things like gold and silver. I know people who are buying silver and they have 9 meals in their house. They're in debt up to their eyeballs. They're renters, and they've taken all their money and bought into silver. I believe that the horse must come before the cart, and you have to have your ducks in a row. So to talk about silver, the reason why I always suggest 10% on the air, and a lot of the 10%ers are now raising their holdings to 25% because people feel that the end is near. Now, again, everything is speculation and hedging, so the bottom 93% doesn't know what's going to happen, because we've eliminated common sense and logic for corruption, manipulation, nepotism, and about 1,000 veils and subsets and disguises under the category of political correctness. So again, for us 93%ers, it's very hard to figure out what direction is going to go. So I'm going to talk about some of the cons first with gold and silver. Now, remember, they call the COMEX the Crimex for a reason. Now, gold and silver is probably the most manipulated industry in America and could be the world. So I'm not trying to discourage cryptocurrencies of gold and silver. I'm just trying to give you the pros and cons so you, as a people, can do your reading, your research, and share information with others, okay? Now, you got to ask yourself the question, are they manipulating down the price so China can catch up with purchases relative to their country's size? Is China hedging for a gold-backed SDR? And see, this is the problem. If people always say, oh, well, we got more gold in China or more gold in America than China and India and Russia combined. Oh, some people say Fort Knox is broke and it's all tungsten-plated gold in the pictures. No, we don't know. The bottom 93%, we get propaganda. 50% of what I read from credible sites on economy and finance, folks, is basically propaganda to try to make us buy a product, a service, or make us think a certain way. Vince?
You're absolutely right. And all you have to do in terms of believe this is just do a search on a topic, and in every page you see following that on the internet is going to be ads on what you just searched on. Yes, buy. You're right. We'll be right back. Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Rich, Miles came on the air with us months and months ago and suggested that we look into Bitcoin. And at the time, Bitcoin was about a little over $700 each. Today, right now, $2,849. I'm looking at the chart for Bitcoin. It's like straight up. It just keeps going higher and higher. A few days ago, it was at 2,200. So there is some euphoria going on with Bitcoin. It's rocketing up. It's unbelievable. Now, I'm not recommending anyone buy it or not buy it. I'm just saying this is what's happening. There's a mania going on right now, in my opinion. What do you think?
Well, yeah, there is, and people are desperate. The bottom 93% would love to get some wealth, and they don't know how to do it. I mean, in 2011 to 2016, the central banks purchased over $7 trillion in assets. Do you know how scary that is? I mean, right now, with the way they're printing money and creating debt, it takes $4 of new debt to create $1 in increased GDP, and this is a 2016 fact. So people are trying to figure out what to do, and what I'm trying to say is, if you're in the bottom 93%, I think it's a lot safer, instead of trying to hit a grand slam home run and put all your eggs in one basket to try to get rich. I think that the only alternative that we have is to prefer to have one bird in the hand in lieu of 2 or 3 in the bush. Okay, we have to have our ducks in a row, have the horse come before the cart, everything from being out of debt, maybe a little food storage, have some certain skill sets, have a little bit of land to grow a garden, raise some animals, grow your own fuel, i.e. Wood. I think there's a combination of a lot of things that we need to start looking at and getting back to basic needs instead of trying to hit this home run. Now, what I'd like to do, Vince, is finish my little rant on gold and silver, and I just want to, I kind of left it before the commercial about how it being the most manipulated industry in America and possibly the world, because the crooks, the corrupt, the status quo, the people, the establishment wants to make it so we can't control our own destiny. And that's why it's not a left-right paradigm and an aristocracy serfdom paradigm. Now, I want to give 2 quick facts about how manipulated gold and silver has been. When Trump won the election, remember precious metals soared through the roof, and then the establishment over the next few days sold 3 times the annual global gold production in paper form to suppress the price. Now, this is an example of naked shorts. And this is why that gold doesn't exist and never will exist. And another example is the gold-to-paper leverage is 250 to 1. In the COMEX, it's 300 to 1. I'm being very gracious and conservative with these numbers. Silver, in other words, physical-to-paper leverage is 517 to 1. And until we separate the paper from the gold, until we get rid of the central banks, until we get rid of the corrupt system run by the elites, I mean, it's all political. Have you ever? I've read transcripts from Lagarde from the IMF. She talks about climate change regarding economics and finance. It shows that it's all propaganda. What they're trying to do is create a narrative to control the mass, control the people. So I want to mention some pros about gold and silver as well. What I'm trying to do, folks, is give you information so you can do your own research, but I'm giving you information that took me hundreds, if not thousands, of articles to read, okay? And I will go over the pros of precious metals when we come back from this break.
Okay, class, we're going into top of the hour news and commercial announcements with Rich Scheben, offgridmontana.com, offgridmontana.com. When we come back, I'd also like to share with you a discussion with Bob Chapman. Our son had a question for Bob Chapman, and that question was, should he take all that he had and buy 1 ounce of gold? Or should he buy a cow? I'll tell you what Bob Chapman said, and I'll tell you what the final result was, because we know the result. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. You know, class, I was thinking, on Friday, hour number 2, I'm going to do a special broadcast. I'm going to talk about taxes. I'm going to talk about how you can start your own business, any kind of business. I don't care what it is, whatever your passion is. I'm going to teach you how to start your own business and pay less in taxes, way less. And I think I must have done something right, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I say that. And I'd like to get Rich Scheben's comment as well. I used to go around the country teaching this seminar, how to start your own business and take the same tax deductions the wealthy take. And during the beginning part of the seminar, I would tell the attendees that if they don't feel that they got their money's worth from the seminar, and I didn't charge anybody, you'd pay an admission to go into a prepper convention, and I was just part of the seminar series that they would have. You know, Rick Miller would be there, Matt Stein, and Dr. Joel Wallach, and a few other USA Preparedness instructors would be there. And I would always say, if you don't feel that you got your money's worth just from the seminar that I was teaching, make sure you request a full refund. And that was not something that was offered by the promoters of the event. I just said, just do it, see what happens if you don't think you got your money's worth. And no one ever did. And I made the comment that if you don't save at least $1,000 every year from what you've learned in this seminar, then I haven't done my job. So on Friday, I'm going to teach the same seminar on the radio. Why? I must have done something right, and I'll tell you why I say that. Because I have not been invited back to any preparedness convention at all to speak. So I'm the only thing I can think of is that they might have been approached by, don't have this guy back. Don't have this guy back because the information is too controversial. Rich, you and I talked about some of the things that I would say on the air about paying less taxes. What was your reaction to that?
Well, the wealthy do it all the time. We call it, the poor people call it barter. The wealthy call it quid pro quo. So it's just, and this is one of the reasons why we have to diversify in commerce. And that's why the powers that be want one system so they can control it. And that's one of the reasons we're talking about precious metals and cryptocurrency blockchain today. Because the powers that be do not want alternative choices. They do not want us to control their own destiny. The system is so corrupt. I mean, just look at how inflation is everything's being controlled. Austerity means confiscation. So the more we have top-down control from not accountable governing people, even elected people who were bought and paid for under the table, we're going to have less control over our own destiny. Just look at money supply alone. Money supply has grown 20 times versus the working population, which has grown less than 1 time. So as the system gets flooded more and more with fiat currencies, and most of that money, as I mentioned earlier in the show, 95% of it going to the top 1 to 7%, depending on what you read, more money is being siphoned from the middle class, not just to give to the wealthy, but to pay for the poor, and that's why the middle class and the poor has melded together. So what the people need to do is create options. Again, plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, because that's what the elites are making us do. And we've got to come up with a formula because we are heading into despair. I read this article just a few days ago. I'm going to paraphrase it, but for people in America 50 and under, the number one cause of death is drugs, overdose. This includes prescription drugs from the corrupt pharmaceutical companies that's hitting the streets. This is a sign of despair, and this is sad. We need to reverse this. We need to give options, ideas, solutions, suggestions to the people so they can start controlling their own destiny, Vince.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I've read the same articles that you have read, and I see the same thing. I see, how do you have a lot of hope when it's tough to get a job? How do you have a lot of hope when when you get laid off and replaced by a robot, and it's happening all over. And if you look at the future, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough, and that's one of the reasons why I'm teaching this seminar, how to start your own business, because I think that's one of the highest and best things a person can do. Start his or her own business. And in class, if you look at who you think is successful in your life, you know people whom I don't know, and you look at them and you say, who's successful and who's not, you'll probably find that people who have their own businesses are more successful than those who do not. Now, that can be measured in lots of things, in lots of terms. One is free time, one is control, one is freedom, one is wealth. You put them all together, and that's how I would measure success. I wouldn't measure it based on money, because I know plenty of people in the news who have lots of money, but I don't think they're really successful because their lives are controlled. They're trapped. They're trapped. I mean, these wealthy Hollywood people, I mean, do you think they can go anywhere and feel freedom? I don't think so. They're recognized, and their lives are an open book. And who would want that? Maybe they do, but I certainly don't. Which I wanted to share a short story with you. Several years ago, our son had a question. And that was, should he take everything that he's earned in his entire life and buy 1 ounce of gold? And it was about $700 at the time, maybe $800, between $700 and $1,000 per ounce. Or should he buy a cow and raise cows? And Bob Chapman, who was a senior USA preparedness instructor, absolutely brilliant man. He was a gold bug, a silver bug, a precious metals bug, and that's what he did. He said, buy a cow. So our son did that. He bought a cow. And he raised cows from that cow. The bottom line is, I just did a real quick calculation. He has turned that $700 to $1,000 investment into $3,000 to $5,000 with that cow. Right now, had he bought gold at $700 to $1,000, it'd be $1,265 right now. So it moved a little bit. But as you said, it's manipulated. As a store of wealth, I think it's okay. I really do. Gold and silver. I'm a gold and silver bug as well. I like it. But I like tractors better. I like farmland better. I like cows better. I like chainsaws, tools, skills, books better. Because I can do more with them. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, you've been to the farm. You see how we live.
Well, and this is one of the reasons when I give a talk, I give I show a picture of what I call Fort Prepared. And it's all the things that you mentioned, being out of debt, a little cash, a little silver and gold, a little land, the natural resources to be able to live a penny saved, penny earned mentality, lifestyle, the skill sets. And I think it's a combination of everything, because the bottom 93% cannot afford to try to hit a home run and become rich. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't gamble. Now, keep in mind when you go into the stock market or you buy bonds or derivatives, or, I could talk about this stuff for hours. Trust me, it's all absolutely corrupt and manipulated. So that being said, we have to think outside the box on certain basic needs like food, water, contamination, storage of all the above that I had just mentioned. But I think what we've really lost is, especially the millennial generation, is a balance in life between nature and technology. And the technocracy is going to bury us. And I'm going to paraphrase what Einstein said. I have a quote somewhere around here, but I can't see it. But he said, when we lose human contact and technology supersedes that, we're going to have generations of idiots. Now, I'm sure my paraphrase is not too far from this quote. And that's where we are heading. And that's one of the reasons why you and I do radio shows, Vince, and you have this show, which is, it shows that you're a patriot, American, and you're trying to help other people. And that's really what the bottom line is all about, Vince.
As you said this, I was thinking of, when I go into an auto store, you're talking about the millennials. I don't remember seeing young people in an automotive parts store recently. I'm talking the last couple of years. And I'm contrasting that when I was younger. You know, I'd be in there and I'd be wanting to get parts and fix up my car, and that's what we did when we were in high school. We would go to the auto parts store and we'd get those parts that we needed to keep our cars running, maintain them, and so forth. And it was a passion. You know, we wanted our vehicles to be the best we could figure out how to make them to be. But I can tell you that I don't see young people, you know, walking in the auto parts store anymore. I don't see them looking at the aisles saying, wow, look at this wrench. That would be a neat wrench to have. Or look at the difference between the Bosch oil filter, the Fram oil filter, the house brand oil filter, the Purolator oil filter, and you know, some other brand. I don't see them doing that. I don't see them reading through the fitment catalogs of which part goes to what vehicle. I don't see that. I don't see them in line getting up to the counter to pay for their parts. They're not there. You're absolutely right. So now we have a generation, at least, that doesn't know how to change the oil on a vehicle or the spark plugs. I mean, that'd be really complicated, right? Changing the spark plugs. There might be 4, 6, or 8 of them. Or check the air cleaner. See if it needs to be replaced. Or go way above and beyond and say, you know what, I'm going to get rid of this paper air filter and get a lifetime air filter. You know, one like a K&N air filter or a green air filter. You know, one that you can clean and relubricate and have it last the life of the vehicle. I don't see any of that. You're right. Rich Sheben's with us. You know, Rich, I was thinking about cash, and I like the idea of cash because 2 things happen when you use cash. One, the transaction is settled right then and there. You pay the cash, you get whatever you bought. If any change is made, it's made right then and there, meaning if you have more cash than the item costs, you get your change back, and that transaction's settled. It's complete, and you can take with you what you bought. I like the anonymity of cash. I think it's a great way to go. Now, credit cards, you don't have that. However, credit cards have a convenience. All you do is you pull out your credit card, it gets swiped or the chip is read, and that transaction is quick and painless. And you settle it once a month, you know, when you pay your credit card bill. So that convenience is, I think, encouraging us to use fewer and fewer Federal Reserve notes for those transactions because it's more convenient to just pull out that one piece of plastic rather than a handful of Federal Reserve notes. And I can see cash disappearing over time because we're too lazy. We're too lazy to settle that account with cash. And I don't like it. I really don't like it. When I buy things, I would prefer to be anonymous. I mean, why do I want the government knowing everything that I do? They know far too much as it is. What are your thoughts?
Well, they can easily get rid of cash by just not printing money anymore. The $1 bill has a shelf life of 5 years or less. So obviously the bigger bills will last a little longer, but if they stop printing cash, I don't know if they're going to get away with it like they did in India, but it's a poorer country. They don't have guns. They don't have a constitution, and they just cold turkeyed the poor in India, basically the bottom 95%. So here I think they would have to phase it out over time, but if they just stop printing cash, in probably 10 years, cash would be gone, and it would be an electronic system, which I think could be one of their plans of action. So anonymity is important, but I think it's more of a mindset. When you don't have the cash, you don't spend something, and that's one of the reasons why we're in so much trouble with debt and credit imbalances in America. We have over $1 trillion of school loans, auto loans, and credit card debt, and the defaults are coming along with it, and it's not a good position to be in. So the credit is drying up, and if you look at the 2-year and the 10-year yield on bonds, they're getting close to inverting, which means that it's a sign of a credit collapse when there's hardly any difference of already less than 1% between 2 and 10 years. So that's a sign of the fact that we are in a stagflationary situation wrapped around a deflationary spiral. We basically have a hybrid system that is destroying everything, and that's why we don't have good economics anymore. We have corruption. And this Keynesian economic system is basically a central bank, top-down, no accountability, elite control that's corrupt and manipulated, and it's created this status quo, or what I like to use the term incognito caste system. So we have to realize that for the bottom 93%, all this talk about increasing GDP is a bunch of BS. Increased GDP is not equivalent to happiness, because this elite interventionism, which if I had to describe Keynesian economics in 2 words, that would be it. Printing, inflating, and buy now, pay later is just destroying the bottom 93% and melding the middle class in with the poor. I mean, Keynesian teachings basically allow government and big corporate America to shift asset and liability columns. That's about as manipulating as you can get. It's creative manipulation accounting. And that's why the elite like tweaking Keynesian economics, because it's part of the teaching fit.
When you talk about stagflation, to me, that sounds like stagnant wages combined with inflation. Isn't that what it is?
It's basically the economy going into the crapper with certain prices going through the roof, mostly for the middle class.
Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Rich, I want to share something with you that the last week or so, actually maybe even a couple weeks, I've been agonizing. I wanted to buy a bathroom sink. I'm working on finishing a bathroom here at the farmhouse. And the bathroom will need a sink. And I wanted to buy a vitreous china sink, which it's just a white porcelain sink. One that's called a drop-in sink. So what you do is you cut a hole in the countertop, and you set the sink in, and you caulk it in place, and that's how it's done. Well, the one that I decided on years ago, actually Mrs. Finelli and I decided on years ago, was made by American Standard. Why? Well, when she grew up and when I grew up, that was the brand that our parents both bought. And we were happy with American Standard. It's probably not the most expensive. It's not the least expensive, but it sure is a durable quality brand. Well, so I'm looking for one to match. Well, they don't make it. What they've done is they've replaced that one with another one. The one that we had has been discontinued. It was about $50 when we bought it a few years ago, and now it's about $100. So the price has increased. But not only has the price increased, the weight of the sink has decreased. They were 25 pounds. Now they're around 21 pounds. So it's a double whammy. Less material at a higher cost. Another example of inflation is oil filters on new vehicles. Now, it used to be that a V8 engine, let's say a Chevy engine, would have an oil filter that would hold 1 quart of oil. It had media that would trap the contaminants that would fit in an oil filter that was 1 quart in capacity. Well, not anymore. The oil filters have gotten smaller. They now hold about 4/10 of a quart of oil, and they have much smaller media surface to trap the contaminants. That's just one more example of inflation. Smaller for the same price, or smaller for a higher price. So oil filters and sinks are both examples of inflation that I'm seeing here. And what I do, as far as the oil filters are concerned, I find the largest oil filter that will fit the specifications that the engine manufacturer designed. Okay? So I look for the bypass pressure, I look for the threads, and I look for the physical dimensions, and then I measure, can I put a bigger one in? I go out there and look at the vehicle and figure, can I put a bigger one in? And I do. And those are the ones that I buy. And I buy them by the case. Because, frankly, I can buy a case of 12 oil filters for the same price as 3 oil filters if I buy them retail. So I just wanted to share that with our class, Rich.
Absolutely. This disposable society, low quality, basically means more profits for the rich, but the very few at the very top. And inflation can be measured in a lot of different ways. I mean, look at food, smaller packaging, dollar devaluation. There's many different ways to go about. And when you increase the money supply like we have, like I mentioned earlier, where it's grown 20 times versus the working population, which has grown less than 1 time, you're going to have imbalances. Basically, how the result is...
And wood chips in grated cheese. Wood chips. Oh, why do they call it cellulose?
Yeah.
Yeah. You get grated cheese, and it says cellulose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's inflation, class.
Yeah. Basically, it's a disassociation with money creation from population growth to replace or substitute a flood of manufactured liquidity for waning demand. So, in other words, we're forcing prices higher despite decelerating growth in demand. It's a smoke and mirrors situation to have regression in our economy to destroy America and to control the masses. And that's why I talk about the aristocracy versus the serf. We've got to get rid of this left-right paradigm. Now, Vince, if I may, we're running out of time. If you wouldn't mind, I would like to, for your listeners, finish some of the pros regarding gold and silver whenever you're ready.
I'm ready. Please go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to go to the pros regarding gold and silver or precious metals in general, folks. First of all, Dubai just created a gold-backed currency, and that's just recently been launched. Now, I believe, compared to what I talked about with cryptocurrencies, which I think is a fallacy, and I think I discussed that in some detail when we talked about that, tangibility and anonymity is going to be more important regarding gold and silver. In fact, you're going to have more ability to have those two features in gold and silver. And do I believe that kryptonite is gold and silver is the kryptonite to the fiat dollar system or fiat currencies in general? Absolutely. But is it important if I believe it? Not really. But it's definitely more important that the elites do believe it. And that's one of the reasons why there's been so much naked shorts and manipulation and corruption for decades regarding gold and silver. Now, another feature, another pro, Arizona recently will no longer impose taxes on capital gains on gold and silver. Now, if the people use gold and silver for regular commerce and the central bank reign was close to over, then I would believe that prices would shoot to the moon. But again, pardon my repetition on this. The fact is that it is, in my opinion, the most manipulated industry in America, if not the world. Now, there's a big debate going on gold versus dollars. But if you look at the tangibility, functionality aspect of it, the cost of digging is a lot higher than the 13 cents it takes to print a bill. Now, when I talked about this earlier in the show regarding looking at a picture of a vault, and does Fort Knox have gold? Who has more gold? Then, does Russia, China, and India have more gold and silver? Do we have it? What about Europe? What about London? What about New York? No one knows. I've read hundreds of articles on this. Nobody really knows. Remember, 50% of what you read is a psyop. It's made to make you buy or purchase goods, services, or make you think a certain way or lean towards investment a certain way. Basically, think confiscation. This is why you really got to put all your eggs in many baskets and not one. Supply and demand, it's so controlled. Free markets, I can do 2 shows on the fact that we've almost eliminated those things. But if you look at supply in gold and silver, it's been going down because of the pressures and the costs on mining companies, and the demand has going up. So if supply and demand ever takes hold, silver and gold should shoot through the moon. And last but not least, our Constitution says that gold and silver is legal tender, unlike anything else. So who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be up to the people to read, to research, and to share information. But if the masses just go into things willy-nilly and create bubbles, it's going to create a loss of consumer confidence. And I think we're going to have more people getting information in order for us as people to control our own destiny and not just jump into all these bubbles. Because I'm reading everything from housing right now, subprime mortgage industries, auto industry. I mean, I read an article not too long ago where one particular auto lender didn't even check for financial backing of collateral on 92% of loans for buying vehicles. I mean, that's a subprime mortgage analogy. I mean, and that's what we're heading that way into housing as well as auto and credit cards and school loans. So we're heading into a situation that is fantasy finances. And we have to get our ducks in a row and not allow the powers that be to manipulate us against each other. Because the elite have really poisoned us against ourselves with the Keynesian economic system, central banks, group identity politics, and especially demographics. Got to remember, folks, since 1990, the U.S. population has been decreasing. And because of the lack of wealth in America and the credit and debt situation that we're in, we can't expect, we were talking about stagflation earlier, we can't expect legitimately interest rates to rise because it would take down everything. We wouldn't be able to pay our interest in our debt, the housing market, especially retail and commercial, which will probably crash anyway, emerging markets, fiat currency confidence, everything will crash if interest rates go up. Now, people say, well, we do have inflation on certain things, and I agree. Food, water, healthcare, college, insurance, taxes, some rent, some lumber in certain areas of the country. That's called stagflation when the economy is in the crapper and going down. Because interest rates, and I try to mention this as often as I can, is a function of three major things: growth, wages, and inflation. And when I say growth, I don't mean population growth, I mean economic growth. So inflation has been exported to low-cost producing countries, and wages and growth is dropping like gravity, folks. I don't believe anybody in America believes that we're at full employment at under 5% unemployment rate when we have over 100 million people out of work. You can't connect those dots. It's fantasy. It's financial fantasy. So this is one of the reasons why Vince and I always talk about putting your eggs in multiple baskets. Skill sets, cash, precious metals, maybe cryptocurrencies. I think there's going to be a lot of cryptocurrencies, or I think they will be here to stay. Which ones survive is going to be speculation and everything about the future, which is, if you want to hedge on that, go for it. But get your ducks in a row and get the information. Vince?
Well, I agree with that. And as you were saying this, I was thinking about what would happen if a person had a company and he decided that if he were going to pay his employees, he would pay them in gold or silver. So I looked up the current price of a silver dollar. The current price is roughly $22. So if you were going to pay a person $11 an hour, the person would get if you paid him in silver dollars, you could give him one silver dollar for every 2 hours of working. Now, when it comes to reporting income taxes, do you report that as, I don't know, $11 an hour, or do you report that as $1 one silver dollar every 2 hours? Interesting. One guy tried it, and he went head-to-head with the IRS. I'm not sure how it worked out. We'll be right back. Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. So, Rich, just to finish up, there was this guy in the 1990s, and he had this company, and he decided he was going to pay his employees labor based on gold in the denominations of U.S. minted gold coins, $50, $25, $10, and $5. And he paid them in that, and rather than paying him in Federal Reserve notes, and their taxes were based on the face value of those coins, not the market value of Federal Reserve notes for those coins. And based on case law, the court decided that income has to be calculated based on Federal Reserve note fair market value rather than the face value. So it didn't work for this guy, even though he used U.S. minted gold coins and the denominations of those coins. He still got himself in trouble with the courts and the IRS because they wanted to be compensated in Federal Reserve note units. So I just wanted to share that with you. So, Rich, in terms of gold or silver, it sounds like you like both. Is that correct?
Yeah, and if there is an uptick, if the powers that be ever lose control of the situation that we discussed earlier, I think silver would go up dramatically because it has a lot of industrial usage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I took apart had a switch that failed, one of our light switches at the farmhouse. And after 12 years, it failed. And so I took it apart, and I wanted to show our family what's in a light switch. And yes, there are these two very small silver contacts that meet. And where they meet, that is where the connection is made. So when you flip that light switch, inside there's a mechanical leverage, and these two silver contacts on the end of spring steel connect. And at that point, those silver contacts, ultimately can wear out over cycling the light switch on and on and on and on. So we throw them away. And I looked at that light switch and I thought, the only thing I can do with this is use this as as a tool of instruction to show our family how a light switch works. And then there's no reason to keep it. In the trash it went, in the landfill ultimately it went. And all of the light switches that have failed are probably in the same place. Different landfills all over the country, actually all over the world. And most switches contain silver contacts. So we just throw it away. There's no recycling of these contacts. And that's not the only thing that's silver that we throw away. We throw away lots of electronic devices. How many computer monitors go in the trash? How much gold goes in the trash with those computer monitors? And how much silver goes in the trash with computer electronics and cameras and DVR players and Blu-ray players and all this other Chinese short-lived electronics that we purchase. In the trash it goes. So the silver supply is ending up in a landfill, and it's probably too expensive to go back to the landfill and remine for silver and gold and other rare minerals. So as life progresses and continues, we're throwing away lots of valuable silver and gold. That's still on the planet. It's just we're not going to be able to get it very easily. And I agree with you that there is a place for silver and gold in our portfolios as a hedge against what is to come. However, right now, it looks like keeping money digits in the bank is not a viable alternative. I mean, we have to pay our bills, but heck, the rate of inflation is way higher than the rate of return on savings. So savings is really not a great idea in terms of return on investment. Your thoughts, Rich?
Well, absolutely. And since we only have a couple minutes left, I just want to, when I talk about the aristocracy versus the serfs in lieu of the left-right paradigm, let me just give an example. Who runs the central banks, the Fed, the IMF, the Bank for International Settlements, World Bank, UN, CFR? Let me just give you a couple of owners under the UN. World Bank, Rothschild Bank of London, Berlin, Federal Reserve Bank of Paris, Bank of Italy, Bank of Hamburg, Amsterdam, Chase Manhattan, Rockefeller Bank of New York, Goldman Sachs, etc. So as the central banks keep buying everything, including so-called toxic assets, where they don't have to pay themselves back, are they going to own all the land, the armies, the food, the regulations, ports, transportation, and the people? It's up to us to start thinking outside the box, diversifying, gaining skill sets, not teaching our children how to push buttons, manage paper, and be politically correct.